Well, looks like we got a delivery. Just got a MTD 18 horse 46 inch delivered. Got to work on this thing. Guy just bought it. There's your model number, serial number. The guy that sold it to him didn't even give him the key, so we got to get a key or rig up a push button start. Doesn't have a battery. Deck seems to be in good condition. Doesn't look that bad. A little bit of rust on the rear end here, but that's fuck all. Guy just needs something that'll cut grass. Okay, so this thing's had an engine swap because that's a 14.5 horse, and that's a newer model engine, and this says 1846. So somebody's blown an engine on this and swapped her out. All in all, it's not a bad machine, so we'll take the deck off of this thing and probably wash it tomorrow just to get some mud and some gunk off of it. And then, you know, like, it's got issues. You can see there's a snapped cable here. They got a snapped cable there, and then, you know, this cable here, that's not connected to anything. So it definitely needs some work. Yeah, so we should be able to get this running for the guy. Okay, so we got a wind warning in effect today for Port Colborne, so I can't use my phone, and I was gonna use my GoPro, but the wind is just so strong. So I ended up getting a windscreen here. We're gonna try it out. So it looks a little something like this. Just covers that up, and then I put my lens back onto it. So now I should be able to film outside in the 100-kilometer-hour winds, and the audio should be all right. So instead of sounding like this, it should sound a little bit like that. Now I don't know if that's gonna be better or not, but we gotta get the deck off of this machine because our doorway is only so wide. So we're popping the deck off, gotta pull the pins, same old, same old. If you wanna see a deck come off, check out my Gilson video. I'll put a link up in the top right there. We just gotta get the deck off, and then we can roll it into the garage and work on it there. But as you guys can see, we got big time wind that's just shredding our carport. Okay, so we got the deck off. It's windier than shit. Look at this. We're losing our shed, boys. The carport might be coming down tonight. We got big wind warning. Massive wind warning in effect for southern Niagara. We might lose the carport, but we're gonna build a big overhang here. We're gonna go like maybe 6 4x4s back, and then over there, and then we'll put a roof onto it. But yeah, we got the deck off. What a complicated deck, guys. It's got, you can see it's a triple blade, and it's got 1, 2, 3 main pulleys. Then it's got your idlers there, and then it's got a stack pulley. So that makes up the difference in height, right? Because this rider's so tall, they can't run a pulley from the engine right to the deck because of the height difference. So they run it to this stack pulley, which then drops the power down to the bottom pulley, which then runs it to your belts. But anyways, we had to get the deck off because we got to clean it anyways. And because it's had an engine swap, we're not sure if the front pulley was the same size as the old engine that they took off. So we're not sure if the deck belt's going to be long enough or whatnot, but the deck's off now, so we can start cleaning that up. We're gonna get the rider here into the garage, and then we can start working on the engine. Getting it fired up is our first priority. Once we know that it'll fire, then we can go ahead and start working on everything else. Okay, so we got our deck all washed up. Doesn't look that wet on the bottom of it there, the undercarriage, but I didn't really wash that because it is dry and it's rusted and there's not a lot of shit. But we just use a real wide dolly, and I just carved it out to the front there with the deck on it like that, and then you can just spray it down, flip it, spray it down, and then you could just, you know, load it back onto the dolly and wheel it to the back. But anyways, we're gonna lift it up. I'm just getting this table cleaned up. We're gonna put it up onto this table and then inspect the belt and everything else. Okay, so we can see here, it's a triple blade. It's only got a tiny little blade on the middle there. But all in all, the deck looks pretty solid, other than a little bit of surface rust. But we'll get these blades off and sharpen them up. Okay, so we got the machine in the garage here now, but got to get access at the carburetor over here. But we got these side panels here, you can see. So we're gonna pop off these side panels. Probably have to take off the hood because it pivots off of the side panels. but then at least we can get up into the engine here. Okay, so because this had an engine swap on it, he's cut off so he could pull this to choke it. Once it fires up, he could push that back and it runs fine. So we might epoxy a little knob on there. Okay, so we had to pull his starter off. You guys can see here it was cracked. There's another shot of it that was cracked. Now this is an aftermarket gear. You can tell that because the difference in color from the original ones. The OEM ones have a little bit of discoloration into it. They're a little bit paler, more of like a gunmetal gray, whereas this one's black. But anyways, this one was cracked, so it had to be replaced, and his starter wouldn't go up, so the plunger was stuck. But we ended up taking a little bit of PB Blaster and a little bit of anti-seize to it. So now when you engage it, it kicks up like it's supposed to, and it drops back down. We even went and hit it with a little bit of black spray paint. Okay, so we got the air filter cover off, and we got that little choke lever there off. Here's the carburetor, dirtier than shit, so we're gonna get that into the ultrasonic cleaner. He's also got a couple fuel filters onto it. This one not even connected, so you know, it's a good thing that this wasn't filled. But he's also missing the long zip ties that go over there, the long black ones. So anyways, we're gonna probably put a new fuel line onto it and get this carburetor cleaned up, because like I said, getting this thing fired up is our first priority. And also because this is an engine swap, the original muffler most likely didn't fit. A lot of these have a big canister at the bottom here, but you know, because this is a different model, it may not have fit. So the guy, you can see, I think he just cut it off. And it might be a little loud, it might not, because he's got this canister up here, so I'm not sure how it's going to sound. But all in all, the engine doesn't look that bad. The coil looks like it's in good condition. No mice got up in there. You know, I was worried about that. You know, remember the red shroud goes over this, and I always worry about mice getting in, you know, through the holes in the panels here and eating your coil wire. But that's okay. We should be able to pop this coil off, clean it up with a wire wheel, set the armature air gap, and this thing should fire up. It's also an overhead valve, so we might even be able to shim the valves if we need to, depending on if it needs it once we get this thing fired up. And when we do fire it up, we'll leave all of the panels, the shroud and the hood off of the machine so that we can fire it up just like this. So that way, if we have to work on anything, we can get access to everything nice and easy. Also, this carburetor has a fuel solenoid at the bottom, so that's what stops fuel from entering your carburetor. The problem is this cable here isn't the cable that goes to that, and we can't find any cables that would go to that. A lot of the problems with these fuel solenoids is you shut your machine off, but a lot of people leave their key in the middle position and not shut it off fully to the left, and what happens is you end up getting 12 volts to that and it stays on the open position, and fuel from your fuel tank goes down the line, goes into your carburetor, goes through your neck, into the cylinder, passes the piston and the piston rings, and it goes right into your bottom end. And what that'll do is it dilutes your oil, so that, you know, you'll be running your machine and your crankshaft won't have proper lubrication because there'll be so much gas diluting your oil, and you'll end up burning out your engine and essentially seizing it up or blowing it up. So again, because this is an engine swap, the wiring harness from the machine itself and the wiring harness from the engine is going to be completely different. So you guys can see here, we got ground wires coming from the frame that are cut and spliced. We got wires here that are just, you know, tied around. You guys can also see that right there, that's a safety switch. And he's got it rigged up from the key switch. Going down here, you can see there's all kinds of, you know, splices in the wires, and he's got it zip tied around and plugged into a different cable that goes into the bottom. So this has definitely had some work done to it. Not sure who did it, but, you know, we really don't want to touch any of the wiring. If it works, we're going to leave it, and if it doesn't work, it's going to be a big job to get it working, because we're going to have to go through it and check all the wires and make sure what works and what doesn't work before we fire this thing up. We pulled the fuel tank off. You can see a little bit better now that he's got safety switches, and it's all kind of a mangled mess in there, but hopefully that doesn't cause any trouble. Okay, so now we got the plug out, and we got the spark tester here hooked up, grounded to the engine. and onto the coil. We got our battery booster hooked up back here, supplying 12 volts. Okay, so we got the parking brake depressed. My old man's gonna turn the key. And we got lots. Okay, so now we know that it's got spark. Now all we have to do is see if it fires. We know it has compression, so because it's got spark and it's got compression, it should fire right up. I think we're gonna take a little bit of carb cleaner, spray it into the carburetor. I'll put the spark plug back in. Now we took it out to do the testing so that the engine isn't cranking over and doesn't have compression, and it just makes a little battery booster like we got work a lot easier without running the engine on compression stroke. But like I said, now we'll put the spark plug back in, hook up the high tension lead, which is your spark plug cable, spray some carb cleaner in there, and fire it up. Okay, we know that the brake safety switch works because when we turned it over without it on, we got no spark. Then when we depressed the foot brake there, we did get spark. So we know that that's really the only safety switch that we need to worry about, as the guys kind of bypassed that one there, which I'm assuming is for your deck height, so that you can't run your machine or you can't start it with the deck in the down position. And also the seat was up and no one was sitting on the seat, so we know that there is no seat safety switch, and that they've also gone and disconnected that as well. And let me just say that we never recommend disconnecting or bypassing safety switches, but when a customer brings us a machine that already has them disconnected, we put that right in the invoice that says we did not touch the safety switches, they were disconnected, and you know, we take no liability for any injuries that result from that. Okay, so now we're going to take some carb cleaner, spray it into the carburetor just a bit, and we're going to give it a little fire and see if she barks. That's it. We got spark and we got compression. We're getting lots of air and it fired. Okay, so now that we know that it fires, I'm going to go ahead and get the carburetor off so that I can get that cleaned up. We'll probably end up putting a new fuel line on it with a fuel filter and a shutoff valve. He still needs a battery, so that's going to be like 65 bucks. That's going to be his cost on that because it didn't come with a battery. But like I said, at least we know that it fires. However, one of the problems is going to be the size and the diameter of the pulleys on the swapped engine. The problem is, let's say that you had a 12-inch pulley on your original engine and you go and swap an engine that has like a 10-inch pulley on it. Well, now your belt is going to be too long because your pulley is at a smaller diameter, right? So there's going to be a lot more slack. That means now you have to put your idler tension, at a greater tension. So we're going to have to see, because when we looked at this and took the deck off, this belt here, this upper belt, wasn't connected to the stack pulley on the engine. So that's still going to be an issue. However, what I can do is go on and get a service manual for this machine, and in the parts list, the parts diagram, I can go and see what part number for the original engine's pulley. Then I can run that part number and it'll tell me the width of the pulley, the actual OD, the outside diameter. And then I can go ahead and measure the outside diameter of this pulley that's on the swapped engine, and we can see if they're the same or not. So essentially the hard part is over. We got it fired up, so we know that it will run. All I got to do now is clean the carburetor. We don't know if it'll drive, so that's going to be our next order of operation. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your engine has compression. That's one of the biggest things, and that it's not seized. We also checked to make sure that it had oil in it, which it did have a little bit in it. But then you get spark, then you get it to fire like we did, then you clean your carburetor. Once that's all done, and you get to the engine to the point where it will start and run on its own, and then it shut off when you want it to shut off, then you want to check to make sure your machine drives. Now there's two ways you can do that. You can either get your machine and take it outside, and once you got your machine fired up, you can go and put it into gear. Now this is a hydrostatic drive, so it's got a neutral, it's got a reverse, and then it's got a forward, and that would be essentially first gear, and then the farther you go forward, the faster you go. So you can do it two ways. You can take it outside and take it for a spin, or you can jack up the rear end. That's probably what we're going to do. Fire up the engine, and then once it's running, push that lever forward and see if the wheels start to turn. If they do, then we know that everything is good, that the tension and the drive belt is good. Okay, so we got our fuel tank here, and we put a brand new fuel line on, and you can see that I cut it. We're just trying to figure out our length here, and we're going to put a fuel shutoff valve on it so that there's right about there, so that he can open up the hood and reach down and shut the fuel off, and then that'll come off of there. And then we're going to end up running a fuel filter right about here. We'll snip that off, and then we'll have another lead coming up to our carburetor. Okay, so we got Freddy's MTD here, where you can see we painted the deck with some black. We're going to have to replace his idler pulleys, as the bearings on the pulleys themselves were completely seized. We also had to remove the stack pulley, because the bearings on the stack pulley were also seized. This is the stack pulley here. You guys can see the bearings. They do have numbers on them. They are numbered bearings. So we'll take this down to Medina. We'll be able to get some new bearings and install those. But these ones on the idler pulleys are just completely seized. Okay, so our bearings were seized on the stack pulley here. We had to get some new ones in. So to get those out, we just used a punch and punched the old ones out. There's also the bolts and this spacer, which goes in the middle. So this spacer here basically just drops down inside. That's what locates your bolt when it goes through. Now the top bearing, we were able to get that pressed in. The bottom bearing here, pressed it down. If you want to get these to the point where they're snug and they don't just slip in, and let's say you got a little bit of resistance, go ahead and use a socket and a rubber mallet, and you can press these in yourself. Just make sure not to damage anything. You know, if it's not going in, don't force it. So you can see here that we got a 1-inch socket here. Now you want to get that socket and that bearing nice and level, and you would just go and hit this with a rubber mallet. You don't want to hit that with a hammer, and you should be good to go. And we can see here the comparison between a new bearing, which you can see spins freely, and our old bearing, which was completely seized. And these bearings here are a 6203 with a 5/8 shaft, and we got these at Medina Supply here in Port Colborne, Ontario. And because we went to Medina instead of getting OEM, they were a lot cheaper. We ended up picking these up at Medina for $4 a piece, and the price for these on Amazon were up over $13. So we definitely got a cost saving there. Now, if we were to go and buy this pulley, this stack pulley here, with new bearings and all, fully assembled from OEM, it would cost over $100. Yet we were able to go and replace both of these bearings, front and back, for the cost of about $8 and a little bit of manual labor, because there was actually nothing wrong with that stack pulley. It was just the bearings that needed to be replaced. We also got the carburetor clean using our new ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, so we sharpened the blades, and we made sure these all turn nice now. We greased the spindles. We got the new stack pulley on there. She's good. It's just catching on that plate there, but well, we got some new parts for the MTD here. We got some new belts. We got a new deck belt and a new drive belt. You guys can see them here. Air filter was pretty bad, so we ended up picking up a new air filter and a new pre-filter. And remember how I was saying you had to manually pull that choke? Well, we ended up picking up a nifty little MTD universal choke lever here, or choke cable. So that end will go into the choke on the throttle, and this will just pop up into the dash. You can see here it's got the tension clips, so it just pops in and then sets in there. We also went ahead and used some of that Craftsman green that we had custom mixed for us, and we just went and painted the back of that, because if you guys remember, it was just covered in rust. Our buddy Freddy there, you know, he really didn't care what it looked like, but we just wanted to hit that so that it wasn't all rusty and, you know, real bad. Well, we got this thing put all back together. It had tons of spark, so we went ahead and put the shroud back on. We got the carburetor clean, new air filter and pre-filter installed. We'll put a new spark plug onto it. We got the fuel line just disconnected for now. We got the choke cable that we went and purchased here, this little guy, and it's kind of It's kind of long, so we got it spooled up inside. But you guys can see it just hooks up in there. At least now, you know, he doesn't have to pop the hood, reach in there and pull the choke, and then once it fires up, you know, with that little wire. So I think that's a better setup. Okay, we got our new belt wrapped around. Everything's where it should be. We got our pulley guards installed and tightened up. So now all we have to do is slide this underneath the deck, hook this up, then we can go ahead and hook up our top belt that goes from the engine to the stack pulley here. You guys can see it's got a fuel solenoid here. Well, the wiring harness for the lawnmower didn't have a wire that would come to turn this on and off when you turn your key switch on and off. So when you shut your key off, it stops 12 volts from going to that solenoid, and the solenoid closes the fuel from going into the carburetor. And then when you turn your key on, it supplies 12 volts, which opens up that solenoid and allows fuel to go into the carburetor. So normally when you turn your key switch to the first position, you want that fuel solenoid over there to turn on so that it allows fuel to go into your engine. Then when you shut your key off, it turns it off and prevents your engine and your bottom end from being flooded with fuel. So up under the dash panel here, you can see there's our key switch. And basically what we did was we took a multimeter and probed the red positive into the back of that connector there, and then we just took the black negative, grounded it to the frame, and what we were looking for was 0 volts when the key was in the off position, but 12 volts when the key was on the center on position. So starting position is all the way to the right, and then you'll have a spring return that'll bring it back to just the on mode. That's the center position. Now what we were looking for was the 12 volts. Then what we did was we came down here, and once we figured out the wire that had 12 volts when the key was on and 0 volts when the key was off, we basically just cut it, put a butt connector, spliced in a line, and you guys can see we got a line running over there, and that comes down there, the yellow one, right to our fuel solenoid there. So now when you turn the key, you can hear the click, and then it goes off. So now this fuel solenoid works as it should. So we brought this outside and we fired it up, and when we went to shut it off, it wouldn't shut off. The engine kept running, and you know, the key was in the off position. So what that meant was that our key switch wasn't grounding the coil, which is right there. So you can see there's a little connector coming off of it, and there's a little black wire right there, and that black wire comes out down here. Now again, this wasn't connected because this is a newer engine, and the engine wiring harness is different from the wiring harness on this machine because it's a different engine, guys. So now all we have to do is splice this wire into the black ground wire on the key switch, and when we turn the key off, it should kill the engine. So we didn't have black wire, so green will have to suffice, but basically we stripped the end of that. We got ourselves this little green cable here. We got some heat shrinking on top, and then we got a butt connector. So we'll connect it via a butt connector, put some heat shrink around it, hit it with the heat gun to seal this end, and then I'll bring you over to the other side. Okay, so we got the hood and the front clip back on. I'll show you what we did for the kill switch. So because this machine has had an engine swap, like I've said before, the wiring harness from the engine is different than the wiring harness for the actual machine. So instead of splicing a wire from the coil and then trying to get it into the key switch ground so that when you turn the key off it grounds out the coil, we didn't want to do that. So what we ended up doing was putting a kill switch directly on the console here, I guess you could call it, the dashboard. So now when it's running, he can just flip a switch, turn it off, turn the key off, and he's good to go. I is normally supposed to be on and O is supposed to be off, but it really doesn't matter. So we put a little sticky up there. But essentially what we did from this switch, we attached one side to the frame, like just to ground, and then the other side we ran it to the coil kill wire that comes off the coil. So basically when you flip that switch, it grounds out the coil and shuts off your spark. And then again, he can just turn his key switch off to turn that fuel solenoid that we wired up off, and everything should be good to go. And this was the easiest way to hook up the kill wire. Because when we did hook up the kill wire off of the coil to the key switch, the one that's supposed to be the ground, it blew a fuse when we turned off the key, and it didn't work out as planned. So like I said, that was the easiest way to go. So I'm just going to roll this outside so that I can get another lawnmower in here. But basically all we have to do now is put the deck on and try it out. We did run it yesterday down the driveway just to make sure that the transaxle worked, because that was the only thing that we hadn't tested. Because like I said, we had to get the engine running and everything else hooked up first before we could test out the transmission and actually drive the thing. So now that we know that it runs, we're going to put the deck on, and this thing's ready to go. We've got a brand new battery installed. Had to get that because he didn't have one. And that's it, guys. That's the quickest way to you know, fix I guess an engine that's been swapped on a different machine with a different wiring harness. So everything works as it should now, but again, he's gonna have to remember to turn his key off first and then flip the kill switch, because if he leaves his key on, then his engine and the bottom end could fill with gasoline. Well guys, this ultrasonic's been awesome. Like I said, you know, it was like $250 Canadian, but if you're working on small engines all the time, you know, it's worth it. Because we, you know, we put a carburetor in and we leave it and we go and do something else and we come back and, you know, it's like brand new the way that these things come out. Now that we run it at a little higher temperature, we're running it at about 65, 70. We run them for about 15 minutes, and you know, we've had I've had buddies of mine come over with dirt bike carburetors. Had a buddy come over with a Harley Davidson carburetor. He said it wouldn't run, wouldn't start. He was having all kinds of problems with his bike. We cleaned it, put it in for 15 minutes, and gave it back to him, and he said his Harley fired right up. So this thing's definitely been worth it. Even had my cousin over saying, you know, asking if he could put some gun stuff in here, but this is the 3-liter again, and yeah, I love it. You know, you can get them in all different sizes, but obviously the bigger they are, the bigger the little vibrators are, and the price starts getting pretty expensive. So this was right in our range. You know, it's good enough to fit a carburetor and some other miscellaneous items in, and you know, we don't have to worry about flipping it over. You know, if something's sticking out, then you'd have to flip it over and do the other side, but yeah, I love this thing. Okay, we got the deck down on the ground here, and we're right ready to put it up under our MTD here. Okay, now I never filmed this part when we were taking it off, but there's a bar here that goes back through here, and that connects up under your frame. But the first thing that we're gonna have to do is, once we get this deck underneath, what we're gonna do is run our belt from this pulley up to our engine pulley, because once you hook that bar on, it'll pull the deck all the way back, and you won't be able to slide the deck forward enough to get enough slack on your belt to go up to the engine pulley. So we're going to slide this underneath. We're going to just wrap our belt around that back pulley there and run it up to our engine pulley at the front of the machine, and then we'll go ahead and start getting some of the pins in. Now what I normally like to do is hook this up after you get the belt done, because that not only sets your forward and your back, but it also sets your left and your right. Also, you're going to want to make sure not to hit off that spring there. It's a bitch to get back on. It's in there pretty good, so it shouldn't come out, but if it does, you'll have a hard time getting that back in. Now, even though we have the deck lever in the highest position, you guys are still going to have all of these bars that are dropping down that you're going to have to be aware of when you're sliding your deck up underneath your machine, right? So you don't want to catch on those, and you definitely don't want to bend them. So what I recommend is go in slowly and just lift them up one at a time, and if you got somebody else that can help you, you know, you can get them to hold up the other side, and you could go right through without catching on anything. Okay, so we got the cutting deck underneath the machine now. It's lined up just like a rough lineup right now. And you guys can see that we got the belt hooked up from the back pulley up to the front engine pulley. It's loose right now. The deck still has to move back more, but we're just lining everything up and just doing a rough lineup right now. Okay, now what you're going to want to do is line those holes up on that bracket to the holes right there on the drop downs from the frame. Now that's where that rod comes into play, guys. So we're going to be putting it up into the second hole from the bottom there, because as you guys can see, there's a spring hooked up on the bottom one of the other side, so you can't go with that one. So again, we're going to slide our deck back, just line it up. Now you might come into some problems. You might have to deflate your tire a little bit, because try to line up the shot as best I can. Sometimes it's hard to pull the bar out. depending on what size tires you got on the machine. Okay, and once you get your bracket lined up with the hole on the drop down bar there, you guys can see just how close to the tire it comes. Just take a small little hammer and tap the rod in. And you guys remember that spring there? That spring is going to go up onto that bolt that's hanging down right there, guys. So after you get your deck hooked up, you're going to want to take that spring and wrap it around that bolt and then put that nut on. So when you're putting your deck back on, guys, just make sure that your spring is in this position here, because you don't want to have it sticking out in front of your tire and then have everything hooked up on your deck and not be able to route it back, you know, on the other side of the tire there. At this point, we got our rod about, well, I'd say 80% of the way through. So we're going to go ahead and put our washer on and then our retaining spring, just to hold it in place so that when we go to the other side and try to pull it through, it doesn't pull out on this side. Something like that, guys. Now come over to the other side, and you might have to line your deck up a little bit. You can see that we're a little bit forward on this side, which is okay, so we'll just move that back just a little bit. And because we got our rod in on that side, it shouldn't move forward or back. So we'll go ahead and line this up, put our rod the rest of the way through, and pin it. Might take a little bit of messing about, but you should be able to get it just like that. You might have to wiggle your deck or you know, make sure your machine's in neutral, and you'll be able to roll the tire forward and back, and you'll be able to get that rod through. So now we'll pin that and we'll move up to our hangers. To get that, we're going to have to lift the deck and probably put a couple 2x4s up under it. And while we're at it, because this rod lines up perfectly with that hole, we might as well put washer and retaining spring on it. Okay, now to get the fronts, as you guys can see, we're a little bit lower. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the other side and see if we can get the back hanger pinned, just like we got this one here on the left side. And then we'll probably lift up the front of the deck and put a couple 2x4s underneath it, just to give us a little bit of height so that we can go and pin that nice and easy. Okay, and just like I thought, the back hanger on the right side popped in nice and easy. So we'll go ahead and pin that. And then, like I said, guys, we'll lift up the front of the deck just a little bit so that we can get just enough height here to hook up our pins on the front. Before we get the blocks up under the deck there, I just wanted to show you guys that there's two hookups here on the deck. Now one of them is for this hanger here, and again, you're going to have one hanger on that side as well, but on this side you guys can see there's two. So one of them is for that guy right there. Now this hanger runs off of your deck lever. So like I said, we're going to get this one and the one over on the left side hooked up first. Then we could go ahead and lower our deck lever, and that should be lined up perfectly with the hole on the inside there. And with our 2x4s in place, we could come up under here, and this should pop right in just like that, guys. Simple stuff. So we'll go ahead and get that pinned and move on to the other right side. Okay, and again, same on this side. You should be able to come over here, pop that right in there just like that, and pin it. Left side one might be a little tricky because it's got a little 90-degree rod that comes off it. However, now you should be able to just drop your deck lever down, and they should line up perfectly to the holes on the deck. Okay, so we got this one in. Now we just got to go and get the one on the left side in. I'm going to put a new retaining spring in because that one is a little bent out of shape, and it's going to be pretty loose in there, and I don't want it to fall out. Good to have one of these guys. You know, you can get these at your Princess Autos, your Canadian Tires, your Napas over there in the States. But, you know, it's just nice to be able to go into the drawer and grab one when you need one and not have to run to the store. And that one right there, guys, it should fit right in as it is. But it is a threaded rod, so if you're too high or too low, you know, you can always adjust it by tightening it or loosening it. But that just popped right in, so we'll get a washer and a retaining pin on it, and this thing's good to go, guys. Now what we're going to do is slide our 2x4s out, just so that our deck sits nice and level, and we'll just go and do a little rough check to make sure that when the deck is in the lowest position, the upper deck belt is nice and tight, and when it's in the highest position, the upper deck belt is loose and has slack on it. Because this one, guys, doesn't have a blade engage on it, so there is no, I guess you could say there is no idler pulley. So on this one, guys, when you drop your deck down, it actually moves it back farther, which creates tension on your belt. And when you lift it up, it moves it forward slightly, which creates a little bit of slack and stops your blades from spinning. Okay, so we got our deck up in the air now. It's on the highest setting. Everything seems to be good. When our deck is in the highest position here, like it is, you guys can see, we got slack on our belt, and that's with the deck in its highest position. So if we go ahead and lower that thing down and then come back under the machine, we can see that our belt is nice and tight, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be, guys. But we're not done yet, guys. We still have to hook up the spring. So what you want to do is put your deck into, I'd say about the middle position, and you should have enough room here to be able to go and undo that nut. Slide this spring up over that bolt and then tighten your nut up on top of it, and you should be good to go. And that's it, guys. Just like that. Get the nut right on top of it, and that's it. So that's it, guys. So if you followed my instructions step by step, you should be able to do this by yourself. You know, it's not rocket science, guys. You just got to know where to start taking things apart, know the order of operations, and when you're putting it back together, and basically just do the opposite of how you took it apart. So if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like for me. I upload weekly. The best way to get notified is if you're on mobile, click that little bell down below, and you'll be notified of all my latest uploads. Be sure to click here to subscribe and click here for my latest video. And as always, thanks for watching, guys.